Hello and good evening all. Thank you for joining me as we take a brief look tonight at the last true GT car to win Le Mans outright, the fastest and the most expensive production car of its day, the McLaren F1. In the late 80s, McLaren was enjoying what can only be called a very good few years in Formula One, with Senna and Prost taking 4 drivers and constructors championships, driving cars designed by Steve Nichols and Gordon Murray for the mark. Murray, however, was getting a bit bored with Formula One cars and wanted to realize one of his chief ambitions, building the greatest road car ever to have existed. Not that he was an ambitious chap or anything. Appointed as chief designer of the new McLaren Cars division, because I guess Formula One cars don't count as cars, Murray was given a loose remit to build the ultimate road car, price no object, and total creative freedom to determine what that looked like. Thus, a number of singular design elements ended up in the final product that typically would have only looked appropriate on a concept car. And the final design is arguably the single purest expression of an individual's design philosophy for any car of the back half of the 20th century, potentially excepting Christian von Koenigsegg's creations, but that's a story for a different time. The car was a mix of Formula One-inspired elements with road-going practicality, so there was a central driver's seat, but 2 flanking passenger seats. There was a carbon fiber monocoque and bodywork, but as much luggage space as the boot of a contemporaneous Ford Fiesta. There was active aero and ground effect Venturis, but double wishbone suspension that prioritized ride comfort over impossible grip levels, and so on and so forth. It even had a stereo and air conditioning, although no radio because Gordon Murray didn't listen to the radio. Mechanically, there was a 6-speed manual transmission, as it was the lightest option available and maximized the driver's connection with the car. Brakes were big 4-pot units from Brembo with steel cross-drilled and ventilated discs on all 4 wheels. The wheels themselves were magnesium to save weight, wearing custom-designed Michelin tires to cope with the target 230-mile-an-hour top speed. But finding an engine was a bit difficult. Murray initially wanted Honda to build the car, further reinforcing the association with McLaren's current Formula One cars, but they were unwilling to build him the requested 4.5-liter 550-horsepower V10 or V12. Isuzu offered their recently developed Formula One power plant that was in testing with Lotus at the time, but Murray wanted something more proven for his ultimate road car. So he dusted off his Rolodex and went back to his days at Brabham, getting in touch with BMW, who agreed to heavily modify their recently developed V12 to power the McLaren. Though it eventually came in about 6% heavier than Murray's original request, it was 16% more powerful than the 550 horsepower target, so the delta was in the engine's favor overall. Famously, the engine bay was also coated in 16 grams of gold leaf to aid with heat dispersion, which is about as 90s as you can get when it comes to heat management solutions. It is effective, though. Each car took more than 6,000 man-hours to complete, cost £640,000 when it was ready for sale in 1992, hit 221 miles an hour at Nardo to take the title for world's fastest production car. It's worth noting that the later and much lauded 240-mile-an-hour record-breaking run only came in 1998 from a test car that had its rev limiter raised well past 8,000 RPM rather than the 7,500 that the stock engine was capable of, and the orders started to come in. Naturally, with this much performance on tap, customers also wanted McLaren to offer a racing version of the car, a request which was resoundingly refused. It took the entreaties of one Mr. Raymond Belm, I assume I'm pronouncing that correctly, who said he would just convert his road-going car into a GT1 spec racer for himself to break McLaren leadership's line in the sand. Initially, they told Mr. Belm that it would be £1 million to get a racing version of the car, but this price dropped to about half that on the provision that other customers could be found. They were, and the already lightweight F1 went on a further diet. All the creature comforts were removed, a big rear wing, a new engine management system, and carbon brakes were added, but many of the underlying mechanicals remained unchanged, including the engine and transmission. Intended to compete in the new BPR Global GT Series and at Le Mans, the series-mandated air restrictors were added, taking away 20-odd horsepower versus the road car, though the race car was still quicker given its 120-kilo diet and more aggressive aero. The original trio of ordered race cars, dubbed the F1 GTR, were ready for the start of the 1995 BPR season that February in Jerez, where the cars would face off against Lister, Di Tommaso, Porsche, and Ferrari's inimitable F40 GT. But they were ready. They qualified in the top 3 spots of the race, but only Mr. Belm's car would finish. It did, however, finish in first, and it kind of set the tone for the rest of the BPR season. Though the Ferraris were equally quick, if even a bit faster on single-lap pace, and McLarens took home victory in all but one of the 11 races they contested that year, with that one other victory going to a Ferrari. 6 customer cars had been delivered by the time Le Mans rolled around, and a 7th entry came under the auspices of Kokusha Kaihatsu Racing, though in reality this was a factory-backed effort using the development prototype chassis for the race car and supported by a bevy of McLaren personnel led by the company's chief engineer. The race, however, did not promise to be an easy one for the cars. In contrast to the BPR series, they weren't just going up against other road car-derived GTs. The favorites for outright victory at Les Arts were the prototypes that had been purpose-built for racing at the track, which were the open-topped minimalistic Courages and Kremers and welter racing cars that had replaced the old Group C vehicles. Naturally, these locked out the top qualifying spots, with the single-seat WRs leading the pack, but making matters worse was that the Ferraris outqualified the best of the F1s as well. Things looked, if not bleak, rather challenging at least. The race turned out to be one of the wettest in recent memory, with the rain coming in about an hour after the green flag flew, and fundamentally negating the speed advantage that the prototypes enjoyed in the dry. The Ferraris started to fall to reliability issues quite early, and the Magnificent Seven worked their way up the order to challenge for the lead before nightfall, using their ability to go longer between fuel stops and better wet weather handling to make up the distance, with 4 cars right behind and putting pressure on Bob Wallach's Courage as they raced into the night. The wet weather was creating problems for the McLarens as well, however. Their exposed gear linkages were getting caked in dirt, oil residue, and all the other nasty things that start to accumulate after hours of hard racing in the wet, and several cars lost time or retired due to transmission-related issues. The factory-supported car that would eventually win avoided this issue with a liberal application of the
handyman's secret weapon, duct tape.
No, not that one, the other one, WD-40, at each pit stop. Having run a drama-free race, it worked its way up to second place behind one of the David Price Racing F1s until they had to pit with similar gear selector issues, eventually finishing in third, split by the Wallach-Andretti Elari Courage in second, each divided by 1 lap. It was the F1's finest hour, as not only had they achieved Bruce McLaren's long-held dream of winning Le Mans, admittedly a couple of decades too late for Mr. McLaren to be around to see it, but they had done it on the Marque's first outing, a feat only previously or since achieved by Ferrari in 1949, and F1 GTRs filled 4 of the top 5 places in the official classification. 1996, then, saw additional deliveries for the car, improvements to reliability, a drop of additional weight, and bodywork changes to keep the car competitive against impending, rule-bending rivals like the Porsche GT1, and more conventionally improved cars like the updated F40. And while they still managed to win the BPR championship that year with a raft of 4 victories for Belm and James Weaver, while McLaren's took 7 overall, they were substantially down on pace to the new Porsche, which was, fortunately for them, ineligible for points in the championship that year, but did monster the late season. Le Mans went all right, but the weather that had favored the GT1s the prior year did not deign to put in an appearance again, and the Group C-derived Yost run TWR Porsche WSC 95 had an essentially clear run to victory, while the 911 GT1s took first and second in class to complete the outright podium, relegating the best of the McLarens to 4th overall, unable to keep up with the faster, definitely not a prototype Gov Porsches, which finished 15 and 3 laps ahead of the best McLaren respectively. For 1997, McLaren went all in and tried to bend the rules as much as possible, but as the F1 had been designed as a road car from the ground up rather than the more recently arrived competitors, these possibilities were limited compared to the updated Porsche and the upcoming Mercedes CLK GTR. However, there was fundamentally revised bodywork, most notably the much longer front and tail, and a new sequential gearbox from X-Track, which were the headline spec changes for the new F1 GT. And while they were able to match the Porsches on pace that year, the Mercs were much quicker still, and after struggling with reliability for the first half of the BPR season or so, became nigh unbeatable. F1s were now also cropping up in other series like the All Japan GT Championship and the British GT Championship, but we'll cover a bit more about those in the extended guide. Le Mans that year, however, boded somewhat better than the 96 edition for the McLarens and other GT1s, as only the returning Yost TWR car outqualified the best of the Porsches for pole position. But Yost ran a second clean race, as they are wont to do. Many cars became barbecues, both McLaren and others, to give us one of the highest attrition rates at Le Mans in many years. And while McLarens did come home to a Class 1-2 and an outright 2-3 behind the TWR Porsche, it was still a far cry from the sodden glories of 95. Now getting a bit long in the tooth, 98 saw waning interest both from BMW, who had provided more extensive support in 1997, from McLaren, and from privateer teams. And only in Japan did the car continue to see entries beyond that year, where Team Take One took a final victory for the marque and model in 2001, before the car saw its last competition outing in 03, still in Japan. A total of 106 cars came off the line through the years, including 28 race cars, 6 prototype/test cars, and 8 homologation models. Some of the retired race cars were later converted to road cars and became arguably the most sought-after models of all, while auction values have exceeded $20 million in recent years. So be prepared with many shekels if you wish to see one coming down the drive on the back of a delivery truck someday, I guess. That brings us to the end of the video. We'll do shameless plugs in the extended edition coming, well, probably next week. But go watch DEF CON GT and the 97 Le Mans Race Report, as that'll cover a good bit of the ancillary information. And for this week's call to action, not featuring the 3 sacred words of YouTube,
like, comment, subscribe.
We'll close with a bit more from Red Green. Remember, I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. Thank you as always for your time this evening, or whenever and wherever you are watching, and I wish you all good night and a good tomorrow.